Hey, Think Realty, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Eddie Wilson, the founder of Think Realty. It's been here since 2013 when I founded it because I'm a third generation real estate investor. And I wanted to take all the conversations I had around the dinner table with my dad and my grandpa and bring them to the marketplace, along with some great friends in the industry that love to share great information and give you a good, clear road path or pathway to actually finding success in this space. Before we jump in, I want to say a quick thank you to our podcast sponsor, which is CV3 Financial Services. When you're taking on a new real estate investment project, having a trusted lender is key. Count on CV3 for your fix and flip, rental, cash out, rate and term refi needs. Visit cv3financial.com/think realty. That's cv3financial.com/think realty. Our guest today is no stranger to this space. We used to do events with him up in Baltimore all the time. He's been on our podcast. He's been on the magazine. He's been in our world for a very long time. Sherman Ragland, thank you so much for joining us today on the show.
Thank you, Eddie. It's a pleasure to be here. Always good to be with you.
I still am waiting on that golf game that we talked about at least 6 or 8 years ago. I ate at your country club. You showed me the course. You said we should play, and we still haven't played yet.
Well, the course has only gotten better. It's okay. I think it's the only Arnold Palmer design in the entire state of Maryland. So
wow.
It's on everybody's sort of top 5 list. It's not necessarily the best course,
sure,
but it is a beautiful course, and the invitation is always open. So when you can carve out some time. I don't know. Can you play like 5 minute per hole golf, and maybe we just play 9 holes?
Just get it in quick. Yeah, very. I need some more golf in my life these days.
Well, yeah. I mean, you got a lot of stuff in that schedule you got, man. I totally. Some days I envy you, and then I'm like, what is he doing? So
just running around.
But you are always welcome in Maryland. And you're always welcome at my country club, and I'd love to get in at least 9 rounds with you. So anytime.
I appreciate it. As long as you don't, talk to me about the Baltimore Ravens, I'll play golf with you, right? Like as long as
I can't promise you that. Remind me, are you a Cleveland fan?
Yeah, you guys stole our team. I still not over it,
Oh, and you stole our players, so it's all even. It's all good. It's all good. And
you guys have had our number forever. So, anyways, but very good. Well, let's talk about real estate. So.
Yes, sir.
Obviously, you are very, very involved in DC, Baltimore, that entire region. What's going on in that area? I mean, are you seeing, real estate is so hyper local today, right? Like things that are going on amazing in the state of Florida are not so going on so well in the state of, New York or whatever. So like what's going on in your space? Are you seeing segmentation opportunities? What's going on that's hot?
Well, I still believe that we are the beneficiary of sort of a trailing trend that's been going on specifically in the DC market for decades, which is when you think about investing overseas, right? Most people who want to go invest overseas, they typically go to capital cities. So if you think about Japan, you think about Tokyo. If you think about Russia, God knows why, you think about Moscow, right? Yeah. And for decades, people didn't necessarily look at Washington, D.C. as the capital city, Los Angeles, New York, San Francisco. And it's really just been going on, I would say, since the mid 90s. And I think it had a lot to do with the sort of implosion, late 90s, really sort of implosion, 2008 in the financial markets. And as you said, money is global, but real estate's local. And in 2010, 2011, when a lot of kids were graduating from college and had spent a boatload of money to get those degrees, there was really only one city in the country that was hiring, and that was Washington, D.C. And Washington, D.C. had for decades been investing and encouraging developers to do housing downtown, to do restaurants downtown. And for decades, developers rebuked them, but that all sort of came together and gelled very nicely. And in fact, world famous chef Jose Andres, who now is this big time humanitarian with everything he's doing all around the globe, feeding people in war zones, et cetera, et cetera. He actually got his start as a celebrity chef here in Washington, D.C. And it was really sort of around that period, 2008, 2009, 2010. And that was really the true renaissance and rebirth of downtown D.C. So now D.C. really is very much perceived in the same vein as most capital cities, because it is actually a place where you can live, work, and play. And obviously, we're seeing a lot of conversion right now in the DC space of conversion of office buildings to hotels and residential. But it's become a very vibrant sort of downtown. And as a result, it's now starting to price people out like what happens in most major cities and sort of follows that sort of typical migration out of the city as people go to cheaper things in the suburbs. And now the suburbs are starting to get very expensive. And so that phenomena of DC being viewed as a world-class destination city, place to go get a job, place to live, work, and play and stay is sort of a newer phenomena, whereas historically people would come to college in DC and as soon as they got their degree, boom, they'd leave, or they'd spend a 1 or 2 year stint in a federal agency, get their bona fides, right? And they're like, okay, now I can go make 200 grand a year in Atlanta because I spent 6 months as a clerk at Patent Trademark Office.
Sure.
So, so we're seeing that continuation.
Yeah.
The other phenomena that we're seeing that I think, again, is sort of more, baby boom. The baby boom is still sort of in very much leading real estate trends, although less so today with Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, whatever. But one of the things that we're really focused on, what I'm focused on personally from my own investing perspective, is taking single family houses and converting them into residential assisted living, but not operating, not just purely from a landlord perspective. So we can find, right now we are finding single family houses that we can get our hands on, and it's a very specific kind and a very specific zip code, because that's where our customers want to be. Our customers are these operators. So our customers can get generally between $5,000 and $10,000 per person per bedroom.
Sure.
And so we're going out, we're finding houses that we can find very easily in the DC area in certain zip codes for, let's call it $430,000, $450,000 acquisition. Put another 50 to 60,000 into that, including sprinkler system, almost always converting garages that are no longer necessary into 1 or 2 bedrooms. And so our cost, our capital cost for that house is roughly about $4,000 a month. And we're renting them out to operators for $7,000 to $8,000 a month.
Wow.
And have been doing that. Yeah, exactly. I mean, even on the back of a napkin, most people understand that math, right?
Yeah.
So we've been doing that and really focusing on that for the past 18 months. We sort of stumbled into our first one pre-pandemic, but coming out of the pandemic, just noticed more and more people wanting to have their parents in a neighborhood located residential assisted living facility versus a mega facility, or even a moderate sized facility. And so really focusing on the needs of the operators who are not necessarily real estate savvy, but they are very savvy about what needs to happen for their clients and very savvy about where they want to be. So we actually have started the process of raising a fund, branded the business as Loving Care Homes. You'll be able to find us soon on lovingcarehomes.com. But basically our niche is we turnkey houses for operators. And we turnkey houses for operators in specific zip codes. And our first fund's very small, very modest, about $5 million. Get the first one right, and then probably either decide 2 or 3 years from now, either to scale it up in terms of a larger fund or scale it out geographically, maybe go outside the state of Maryland. But that's sort of our focus right now. And I'm really happy about the fact that my youngest son, David, who took a real strong interest in real estate, he's 23 now, really got hot and heavy into the business during the pandemic when the university was attending, sent all the kids home. Well, a lot of kids went home and played video games. He went home and flipped houses. So that's
great.
So he's got
awesome.
And I love what you said at the intro about, you're third generation real estate investor. So I'm first, Dave's second, and we're looking forward to seeing a third, but it's so true. My brother-in-law and his father actually started Spirit Halloween stores. I don't know if you're familiar with the Spirit Halloween stores, but serial entrepreneurs, and anytime we get together for a family function where I'm there with them, just watching that interaction between my brother-in-law, his father, and my nephew, and that sort of transference of knowledge, talking about business, the stuff you don't learn in school, the stuff you learn around. And so I'm really pleased that I'm able to do that with my youngest son, who of all 3 kids decided that he really wanted to go hot and heavy into the business. So,
and you've got a leg up too, right? Because not only have you been an active real estate investor, you've been an active real estate educator, right? Like you've had academies, you've been teaching and training people this. So I think there's a difference. It's like there's people that are competent, and then there's the conscious competent, right? The person actually understands why they do what they do. And I think that sometimes when you're educating others while doing it, you become a very powerful force to be reckoned with, right? And so like to be able to pass it on to your children is great. 2 quick comments. So interesting. DC, obviously, I mean, I remember in Georgetown when not only would you not buy something there, you wouldn't go there. Like I was scared for my life in Georgetown, like a long time ago. Now Georgetown is this like beautiful place. It's been gentrified. It's crazy. So if you have not seen DC in a while, like, and you haven't been to our nation's capital, I would encourage people to go there because it is night and day. So, and then the second comment,
and I would say it's
yeah,
not just Georgetown. It's all of DC.
Mhm.
All of DC is on fire and really has been on fire since about 2010.
Yeah.
And again, I think when Jose Andres opened up 1, then 10, and now I think he's got 20, 30 restaurants across town. People like, okay, this is real.
Right.
You know, this really is a place to live, work, and play. And that is now sort of spread beyond DC proper, which is not a very large. DC as a jurisdiction, as a city, is not very large. In fact, most people, and again, another sort of like stamp of approval was when Amazon said they were going to move their corporate headquarters fundamentally to DC. They moved it to Arlington, but it's just across the river.
Right.
And then of course, whatchamacallit casino. Who's the big guys? MGM opened up their casino in our neck of the woods, Prince George's County.
Yeah.
And they say
which
that
is the national,
most profitable.
the National Harbor area. Okay.
Yep. Which, by the way, was a great place for you to do an event. Great place for you guys to come back to do an event.
I know. We need to come back someday. Very, very soon, for sure.
I don't think MGM was open when
it
you
wasn't.
guys
It wasn't. It was not when we were there. It was being built. Yeah, it's been a while.
But MGM says that is their most profitable casino outside of Vegas.
Wow. That doesn't shock me. I mean, obviously it's a great location. It's strategically located between DC and Baltimore. It's just a great spot. Let's shift gears a little bit. And by the way, I love the RALA model, right? That residential assisted living concept, but it's a great model. Love the cash flow on it. And the fact that you're providing a passive way for people to get involved, so vitally important. And one more quick stat I just was reading the other day. Over 15 million baby boomers will leave, who own their own companies, will leave their companies, 15 million of them in the next 7 to 10 years. But the interesting stat that's tied to that is over 70% of people change residency between 65 and 72 years of age, right? I think it's going to be the great disposition, right? Like, I think there's going to be this massive movement. And so capturing it on the residential assisted living side is brilliant. But I also think that there's this massive wave of houses that still have your grandma's wallpaper on the kitchen wall, that are going to need to be rehabilitated as well. And I think that that's coming.
It's scary. Like, we will walk into a house, and I'm still very much involved actively, although Dave's going to be taking over acquisitions shortly.
Sure.
And you walk into a house and everything in the bathroom is pink. Right. And just like you said, and it's like nobody's touched this house since 1956.
Right. Yeah.
I'm like, I wasn't born in 56 and people have been living this way.
Yeah.
Sure. And you ask the question if you can get the answer. I mean, most of these deals we find in the MLS, but some they're off market deals. Right. And it's like, oh yeah, mom lived in that house until like 4 years ago.
Sure.
Since the 50s. And it's crazy. But yes, I totally agree with you in sort of bringing that whole house into sort of the 21st or 22nd century. Yeah. That's a big
I think it's going to be, everybody talks about how we're so underbuilt today. We're 3.5 million homes, 4 million, how many millions of homes we're underbuilt right now. And I think that some of that is going to be extinguished by what I believe is just going to be old housing stock coming back on the market. Let's jump into something that I know you're well versed in is everything that's going on with NAR right now, the National Association of Realtors, right? I mean, like,
that's a hot mess.
As a real estate investor, I've always negotiated my rates on percentages, so it's like, why is this such a big deal right now? Why is this lawsuit such a big deal? And why is it churning the entire marketplace?
Well, I think you have to go back in time, and I may be one of a handful of people you could ask that question to and probably get as direct an answer as possible. I got my real estate license when I was 23 years old, right? And I just turned 25. The real estate business has been really tough for the past couple years. So I got my real estate license in 1983. And in 1983, believe it or not, the big deal was this new thing called buyer brokerage. And so if you kind of go back historically, call it, 70s, 60s, whatever. Historically, what happened was all real estate agents worked for the seller. It was called sub-agency. And without getting too legal, too technical, et cetera, what would happen is people would go to the settlement table, buyers would go to the settlement table and find out that just about everything they told their real estate agent was passed right back to the seller. And they're like, well, wait a minute. I told you in confidence that I'd be willing to pay $200,000, but you were supposed to make the offer, and you made me believe that, the whole time you were representing me. And then they're like, oh, no. According to the law, as it was back in the, let's call it pre-80s, all agents were sub-agents of the seller. Mm-hmm. And so what happened was there's a massive wave across the country to create this new thing called buyer agency, where basically, as the buyer, you have your own agent. They have a fiduciary responsibility to you, which is a big, 25-cent word, but it has some very specific, like if I tell my agent, I'm willing to pay 200, but offer 150 and don't tell them, like you have to, as an agent, you have to do that. You have to protect that person's interest. So what happened was that first wave was we created buyer agency, but we held to this old notion of the seller still paying the commission. Mm-hmm. But at least the buyer was represented, call it post 1980s. And again, this sort of swept through like a California wildfire during the 1980s. And so since 1980 and 2024, like 40 years, everything has been based on agent. The seller has an agent, the buyer has an agent, the buyer's agent has to protect the buyer's interest, right? But they're paid for by the seller, and everybody made a big deal of it. And most of the business models for residential brokerage were centered around that whole concept. Keller Williams, EXP, Coldwell Banker, they were all like, hey, go get the listing, get your 6%, split the 6%, 50-50 with the buyer's agent. And everybody understood and still understands that if you get a listing as a real estate agent and you don't offer compensation to the buyer's agent, nobody's going to show your house.
Right.
Okay. And like most people, insider secret, most people realize it. Now, we're a little bit fortunate in Maryland. I never thought I'd say these words, but Maryland being a deep blue state, being heavily regulated like California, Massachusetts, there's a pretty bright line between buyer agency, seller agency, with the buyer agency, the whole disclosure thing that we've been doing in Maryland for decades that is just now starting to catch wind, because for years, nobody really sort of disclosed that whole, there was a lot of opacity to, the whole transaction and who's paying for what, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All buyers knew was I hire an agent, they represent me, and they magically get paid at the settlement table, and I don't have to come out of pocket for anything. And it worked beautifully, like I said, for 40 years. Now you have this lawsuit. A lot of people don't understand that the Setzer, whatever the name of the plaintiff was, he'd been suing NAR for like 30 years on this issue. And he finally found a sympathetic judge.
Wow.
And so the whole world changed overnight. Last summer, we did a special on it. I want to say it was like July or August, when almost nobody was talking about it. And at that point in time, on the first lawsuit, I think it was a $2 billion judgment, but then 2 or 3 more lawsuits in the hopper. And of course, the day that the guy won the lawsuit, he went out and filed 15 more. Yeah. So these things are popping up like so. Eventually, what happened, which was the National Association of Realtors, NAR, had to come to the table, had to settle, if for no other reason to like extinguish all of these lawsuits that were going to literally just sort of bankrupt them. I think National Association of Realtors has somewhere in the order of like 2 million members, annual dues is like $300. So you just do the math, right? They could not have lasted 6 months, all this litigation. So what's happened now is as a result of the settlement, which recently happened, not only do all the lawsuits go away, but NAR and many of the large brokerage firms, again, Keller Williams, Coldwell Banker, et cetera, have now agreed to a standard set of practices that basically says, hey, buyers, you're on your own. You got to negotiate your own compensation, and no longer in all of the various multiple listing services will there be anything about compensation made available. So what's really happened, and I think Barbara Corcoran commented on this last week, it is a freaking train wreck, completely agree, and it will probably take years. I've heard some people who have not had their license as long as I have, and I think I've had my license about as long as Barbara Corcoran has, who said, oh, well, this thing will all be resolved in about 6 months. Oh, hell no. It's not going to happen. Wow. And so it's really sort of, hey, the train was moving 100 miles an hour in this direction, and all of a sudden we slammed on the brakes, and we were told, take this 10-car train and split it up into individual cars. And now you got 10 cars going in completely different directions. Wow. And so that's kind of the best analogy I can give. Having said that, this is an awesome time for real estate investors, because I think one of the big, and sort of like, I can't really sort of go through, we don't have enough time for me to go through every little thing, but I think there's going to be 2 or 3 things that are going to be the immediate fallout. So immediate fallout, number one, I nor Barbara Corcoran nor anybody else can tell you where this industry is going to be 2, 3, 4 years from now, and how long it's going to take to sort itself out. So massive confusion, massive disruption always creates opportunities for entrepreneurs, right? And we've seen it time and time again. Like everybody was going this way. Now we're like all scattered to the four corners of the earth. Like, I think even there was like a religion that everybody got scattered to the four corners, and that's when the religion really grew, right? Christianity, right? So I think in the short run, people who are smart, people who are paying attention, are going to see new business models, are going to see opportunities, and they would be smart to take advantage of them. So that's sort of number one. Number two, I think specifically for investors, what's going to happen is National Association of Realtors, the sort of big six real estate brokerage firms, are now going to be instructed and will be instructing their members to not offer compensation, or at least coach the seller that they don't have to offer compensation. And anybody who's been in the industry for more than a year knows if you don't offer the buyer's broker compensation for showing your house, they are not going to show your house.
Right.
And so we're going to see days on market, which have been, again, depending, a really hot market, days on market might be a week. In a normal market, in most places, days on market is probably about 45 days. We're going to see some people in the exact same neighborhood watch as their neighbor's house sells in a week. And they're going to say, well, my neighbor's house sold. And of course, my neighbor got $1 million because everybody's neighbor always gets $1 million. But my neighbor's house sold in a week. Why isn't my house selling?
Right.
And they're not going to realize, well, the reason why your neighbor's house sold is because they offered 2% to the listing agent and 3% to the buyer's agent. And all the buyers were lining up, bringing buyers in every single day. Right. But you decided, oh, well, hey, I can save some money. Right. Why not offer it at 3%? So nobody's showing your house.
Right.
And your listing agent, quite frankly, is probably not being, let me just say it this way, not being 100% honest with you, because they probably sold you on this notion of, hey, just give me 4% and don't worry about anything else. Right. And I've got a student right now, Eddie, I'm partnering with, and he's a builder. He's rehabbing the house. It's a little premature, and I told him it was a little premature, but he decided to go ahead and interview real estate agents. He didn't do what I instructed him to do, which was find the top producing agent in that neighborhood. Instead, he listened to some radio commercial. And the guy comes in, I wish I was making this up. The guy said, well, we're the top real estate production team in the DC area. You can give us 5% and work it out on your own with the buyer's agent, if there is a buyer's agent. Now think about 5% for listing your house.
Wow.
And by the way, we promised and guarantee you that we'll get 6% more than anybody else. I mean, first of all, how in the world can you guarantee you're going to get 6% more? How do you even measure that?
Right.
Second of all, 5% with no compensation to the buyers. Are you out of your freaking mind?
Right.
So
that's crazy.
We're already starting to see less than, I'll just put it this way, real estate agents who have not 100% integrity, taking advantage of the fact that we've seen this decoupling of the buyer's commission. And some are already starting to say to their clients, just give me 3, 4, 5, 6%. Right. You don't have to worry about the buy. Now, after their house sits on the market for, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever, and they're fed a whole bunch of cock and bull stories about why it hasn't moved, then they're going to suddenly wake up, do their research, and go, oh, I should have been offering buyer's compensation all along. Now, what does that create? What does that create for real estate investors? Well, first of all, most savvy real estate investors who are working the MLS or hacking the MLS, as we like to call it, they're already versed in the fact that they should be paying their buyer's agent not only 2-3%, but probably a bonus based on their ability to negotiate the price down. So now we come in, and I tell my agents, and I tell my agent, because even though I'm the principal broker, I still use an agent because, quite frankly, I don't have time to go out and look for this stuff. But I tell my agent, not only am I going to pay you 3%, but I'm going to pay you a bonus on top of which now start specifically targeting all houses that have no buyer compensation.
Right. No buyer compensation, sat on the market for a period of time, right? Like, I mean, it's going to be a huge opportunity.
Because after 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and again, they're hearing these stories of the neighbor who sold the house in a weekend, but theirs isn't. Yeah. They're going to get frustrated. They're going to get very emotional. They're going to start making decisions based on their emotions, not based on facts. And we're going to wind up getting that house and, probably less than we would have if they had gone ahead and paid a 3% commission and had 300, buyers come to the door one weekend and somebody make them a decent offer. So I think it's a huge opportunity for investors who really understand how that part of the business works, the whole sort of listing of houses, selling of houses, and is willing to pay their agent, good compensation for getting the job. And then I think the third opportunity really speaks more to the agent, which is if you are an agent and you've been at this game for a while and you're not really, really one of those top-notch listing agents, which is a very hard market to crack. I mean, typically the best listing agents have sort of cornered the market. So most of what's left over is a little occasional listing here and there with your cousin, but for the most part, you're getting buyers and taking buyers out in your car.
Right.
If you are that kind of an agent, you need to really start thinking seriously about taking on investors.
Yeah.
Because this whole notion of, you're going to refer business to me for the next 7 years, wrong. Like people buy a house, they never call you back.
Right.
But if you get an investor, and investors, generally speaking, are not opposed to paying your compensation.
Sure.
Right. We'll pay it all day long as you get me the price I want.
That's right.
And I got one agent I'm working with now. She's not even affiliated with our firm. And she's already brought me 3 houses that we have, one under contract, second one we're in negotiations with. And the third one, the guy decided he was really more interested in a lease option, which actually works better for us. So she's brought me 3 deals in 3 days.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, Cashel, bring me more.
As many as you can bring. Yeah.
And I will pay you. I will gladly pay your compensation plus bonus all day long versus. Sorry.
No, you're good. I really appreciate you unpacking that for us. Like, I think that it's one of the things, like I've heard so many people just talking about this, but nobody gave as detailed as a breakdown as you just did. And I know we're out of time, but I really appreciate you unpacking that. And how can you'd mentioned the fund in the beginning. If they're interested in getting involved in your fund on the residential assisted living, how do they find you? What's the easiest way for them to get involved?
Well, I mean, the easiest way is just hit me up at RealInvestors. So just realinvestors.com. All our contact information is on the website. And if you are new to the world of real estate investing, or you're an agent who wants to learn how to work with investors, we got something called the 21-day challenge that I strongly encourage people to go through. It literally is a 3-week program, but really it's very heavily oriented towards that whole hacking the MLS and finding deals in the MLS.
That's great.
I think that's going to become more important. They can find that at www.21day-quickstartchallenge.com. 21-day quick start challenge. And I think you guys are going to put some show notes or something.
We will. We'll put it out there for sure. Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Well, I appreciate the time. Thank you as always for being a part of Think Realty and contributing to our viewers and listeners, and appreciate everything you do for the industry.
Always good to see you, man.
Yeah. Thanks, Sherman.
Talk soon.
One quick thank you again to our podcast sponsor, which is CV3 Financial. When you're taking on a new real estate investment project, having a trusted lender is key. Count on CV3 for your fix and flip, rental, cash out, or rate and term refi needs. Visit cv3financial.com/think realty, cv3financial.com/think realty. And also make sure, if you have not already made plans for July 31st, we have our virtual REI summit. This is a first for us. We usually go into the marketplace, but we've had so many people from a national perspective wanting to join our events. And this year we're only in Phoenix and Orlando. So we decided to do a virtual summit where we'll make this available to thousands of real estate investors to come in, learn, be educated specifically about how to take advantage of an election cycle. So on July 31st, we're going to hit those topics really hard. And I know that'll be a huge benefit to you to make sure you take advantage of what is going to be, I believe, one of the greatest opportunities this year when the election cycle really starts to churn the opportunities that we're going to talk about at the summit. Tickets are only $24.99, but also one of the best ways to get involved is to join our Think Realty Plus program, which is $14.99 a month. And you get the magazine to your doorstep. You get all the tickets to all of our shows, the virtual summit, so many amazing things as a part of that program. And I highly, highly recommend it. You can go to thinkrealty.com/summit 2024, thinkrealty.com/summit 2024. Put in the code LAUNCH to get all the discounts. And hopefully we'll see you on July 31st. Have a great day.